Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
People tend to equate the federal government with Washington, D.C. Well, now a new website shows just how broadly government operations are smeared across the country. It's from the Impact Project. For details on how the latest firings and contract terminations are affecting local communities, Federal News Network's Terry Gerton spoke with the founding director of the Impact Project, Abby Andre.
I think one of the things that people don't think about when we're looking and thinking about the federal workforce is the variety of jobs that people can have with the federal government. For example, in California, there are 7,000 probationary federal nurses that work with the VA and other agencies. The federal government employs cooks who work on military bases and custodians and people from all educational backgrounds. And so some of what we're seeing is that these impacts are reaching everyone from a locksmith responsible for facilities at a national park all the way up to attorneys at the DOJ.
That makes me think of things like park rangers and farm inspectors and food safety inspectors that are really scattered all across the country. As you started to put the map together, what surprised you?
I think I was surprised by people are embedded in different communities. I've spent the last 15 or so years either working with the federal government, in the federal government, studying the federal government. And I absolutely should have known that it's not just our state capitals that houses federal workers and federal programs. They are at the county level, at the local level, people who are embedded in state offices and local government offices that really are enmeshed in our communities.
And so what prompted you to actually start pulling all of that data together to make this map? Why start the Impact Project now?
Well, I left the DOJ in 2019 and started working at Vermont Law School, where I taught administrative law and studied natural disasters. And then after that, I decided to go back to school, and I'm studying social science at Ohio State. I'm getting my PhD now. And so along the way, I picked up skills needed to try and understand what's happening. And as the news really started rolling out about changes to the government writ large, I looked around and realized that there wasn't anyone else mapping with this kind of accessible visualization the whole scope of federal change. And it felt like a very important resource to educate localities about what's happening, to humanize federal workers, and to start thinking about how we'll want to understand this from an academic perspective in the coming years.
The map is part of what makes this so accessible to anybody who wants to look it up. But you also mentioned communities. I'm wondering, are you finding that states and communities, or maybe even companies, are using the data that you display in the map to explain what's happening to them locally or to mount a defense against any of the pending or actual policies?
I'm not aware of all the ways the map is being used. We launched last week, and I can say that since then, we've had an outpouring of questions from some of the types of folks you were just describing, from companies, from local organizations who are trying to build their own kind of resource. And my hope is that it can be used by local governments, by state governments, journalists, policymakers, really to take the data, which is as transparent and as objective as we can provide, and then use it in ways that make sense for them.
Just as a data point, because I went looking for things that were interesting, South Dakota has over $35 billion of federal grants, plus another $13 billion in federal contracts. I'm guessing most of those grants are Medicaid or farm supports, but they could stand to be really impacted by the grant cuts that are coming out of the federal government right now.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things we tried to do is give a snapshot of what federal funding looked like for each state last year. So when you click on the map, you'll see a summary of those in contract and grant dollars that were obligated by the federal government. And I was surprised at some of these numbers for some states that I wouldn't have expected to take quite so much government money. And it's not just money flowing to the governments, it's money flowing to individual farmers under the IRA, or to Medicaid programs or domestic violence programs, right? So these numbers really bundle up money that goes to state and local governments, as well as individuals and private entities.
I'm speaking with Abby Andre, the founding director of the Impact Project. So, Abby, let's dig into the data itself. You mentioned it earlier. Where does the data come from?
So we pull our data from 3 sources. The base of the map is all government data. It's from OPM and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and the census. And that kind of orients map users to the federal footprint in each state. But the dots themselves come from newspaper articles, from government data as it becomes available, but also from testimonials. So in late February, we circulated surveys to federal workers who had been fired, had resigned, were put on leave, grantees, and contractors and vendors who work for the federal government. And we have about 1,000 of those represented on the map right now also. And it gives them the opportunity to tell their story in their own words, and for local community members to understand that their neighbors, their local officials, the people who come and take care of their sewer lines or their water inspections, right, may have been impacted by the changes we're seeing.
And if people didn't get that survey initially but want to tell their story, is that an opportunity that's still open?
Yes, absolutely. If you go to theimpactproject.org and click on the Share Your Story link, it will take you to the surveys that are available. And you can also go there to share a newspaper article from your area that you think might be important and you'd like to see posted on the map.
So one of the things we hear a lot about government data these days is that you can't trust it. How do you make sure that the data that's displayed in this map is accurate and trustworthy and nonpartisan?
So a few things. You are absolutely right that the landscape of federal data right now is tricky to navigate. And that's one of the reasons why I am stitching together data from as many different sources as I can. But the impact map is iterative. We are changing all the time. We are correcting and tweaking and adding all the time, in part because we are very committed to having it be as accurate and transparent as it can be. And as to transparency and partisanship, it's a difficult time to try to present a data forward story and in a nonpartisan way, because the nature of the actions right now skew towards cuts. But we are tracking and continuing to track additions to the government that we're seeing, local responses that are creating some safety nets for folks who might be impacted by federal cuts. So we really say quite straightforwardly on the website that the data is to speak for itself, that it is not intended as advocacy. Rather, it is intended to try to paint as accurate a portrait of what is happening on the ground as we can.
So if somebody is using the Impact Project map and says, aha, that number is incorrect, I know because I work on that project or I have data, you can sort of crowdsource your accuracy checks.
That's right. You can email us at info@theimpactproject.org, and we really encourage you to do that. A lot of this data has been stood up through crowdsourcing effort and continues to be made better all the time.
Perfect. And so now that you've got it all together, what are some of the next steps? How do you want to expand the display? There's a button for dashboards. What's coming next?
That's right. So in the coming weeks, we are going to be adding a few different things. The first, as you mentioned, are state dashboards. You'll be able to go and see a much deeper dive into impacts in your state. We say South Dakota has 1,224 probationary federal workers. The dashboard will tell you what jobs they have, who do they work for, what are the agencies. We'll also summarize federal contracts and grants impacted, state responses, and in the future, in the coming months, begin to do some analysis of what we're seeing in each state, economic analysis, and some more data summary to help people really get their hands around what's happening.